I've graduated from, like the Underberg. It's like you take down the whole bottle in one go, and that's kind of like the way that I do it with 4 ounce Angostura bottle. It truly is bitters and soda, uh, in that order.
So you don't charm the devil with your rock and roll load. Knows that country music's gonna save your soul. The devil runs his groove in them rhythm and blues. That Sam is gonna get you some in the end.
Welcome back to the Speakeasy. I'm Damon Bolte.
And I'm Greg Benson, and welcome back, Damon. It's good to have you, man. How you been?
I've been well. Yeah, thanks. Taking some weeks off of the show and just trying to play catch up on a bunch of other projects and things and life stuff. And
are you saying that life is difficult these days?
Dude, okay, so I got a new vehicle.
This feels like a yes.
So I something terrible happened. This sounds like total like first class problems. I traded in my vehicle for a fancy SUV that's diesel.
Nice.
So not realizing
that shit ain't cheap these days, huh?
Dude, in California it's almost $9 a gallon.
Jesus Christ.
Oh, with all the shit that's going on in the world, I'm just like, God damn. I didn't even think about it when I was getting it, but it's pretty cool. Anyway,
you didn't think that we were going to get in a pointless war in Iran like 8 weeks ago? Come on, man. Someone on Kalshi saw that coming. I don't know why the rest of us did. That all sucks. That all sucks. But you want to hear some good news? You want to hear a good innovation I heard of recently?
Sure.
There is a spot in Verona, Italy, that is trying this new thing.
Verona.
Yeah, in Verona.
Juliet.
Exactly. In Fair Verona, as I've heard it called.
Fair Verona. Right.
Where we lay our scene. They're inviting people to put their phones in a box that goes away. It is a locked box. You don't get to touch it during the meal. And if you do that, they reward you with a free bottle of wine, which I think is genius. Number one, because we're all addicted to these stupid fucking things. So like that is, anytime you have a forced incentive to part with it and enjoy the company around you, is great. I also kind of love the fact that it's not just, we invite you to do this. It's like, hey, if you do this, we'll give you this free bottle of wine. It creates that nice Pavlovian association between saying goodbye to your phone for the next 2 hours and getting this wonderful free thing. Exactly, Riverside. I don't know why. Subscribe to the YouTube if you want to see the weird thing that AI just did. Just gave me a weird birthday party here. But yeah, I think it's a genius idea. I read this article and I was like, I am going to do this the next time I hang out with my family. This sounds great. I don't know. What about you?
I love that. I mean, it reminds me of when we put the cell phone scrambler in the bar at Prime Meats so people couldn't use their phones. But incentivizing with not just a quiet, good time with strangers, some wine. Also, it's great on the business end too, because I'm sure, wine in Italy or in France, the stuff that we get here, there's so many import fees and taxes and all that stuff. And it's basically a gesture that's free for them.
The greatest bottle of wine I've ever tasted was in Tuscany, and it cost €2.
Yeah,
it was
exactly.
So good.
Hey, so I was going to ask, was that like an April Fool's joke, or?
I'm pretty sure this was real. I actually didn't check and see if it came out on April 1st. Now I'm going to have to go back and check and see. If it's not real, I'm sure there are lots of places that are going to start doing this, because this sounds like a lovely idea. And frankly, I don't know, man. This must be what smoking was like in the 1960s when all those studies started coming out, that it turns out it's really bad for you. And I think as a society, everyone must have been like, oh, fuck, this isn't good. Oh, we've been doing this since I was 12 years old. It's kind of I feel like we're kind of in a same cultural moment here. So anything that can help us kind of break that addictive cycle, I'm for.
Yeah.
I do think cigarettes are making a comeback, though. I mean, I think that the vape and or the douche flute, I think that has taken a hit, and people are wanting to, people are wanting to smoke analog. They're wanting to get back to, times are hard. I mean, people are like, oh yeah, you shouldn't smoke. You shouldn't smoke. You shouldn't do this. And they're like, well, news isn't that great.
Yeah. You know what? Yeah. Sure. Why not? Cigarettes are cool again. Drinking isn't cool. I don't know what's cool anymore. But you know who is cool? the guy whose voice we've been hearing for the last few minutes here. He is the former beverage director of a little bar here in Brooklyn that you might have heard of called Grand Army. And now he's the owner and the beverage director of a bar called Bespoke in Wilmington, North Carolina. We got Robby Dow. Robby, thanks for being here, man.
Thanks for having me. Pumped to be here. Long time listener, first time caller.
So have you taken up smoking, or are you still, on that health nut trend of not doing it?
Yeah, I in celebratory fashion, with buds sometimes, not all the time, but I can't say I don't from time to time. Times are hard.
As we all know, if you've been drinking, it doesn't count. I'm pretty sure
that's
that
right.
is the Surgeon General's official stance these days.
That's exactly
why I
right.
haven't been smoking for 30 years.
But on the point of, before I forgot, you were mentioning the technology stuff in the news and in bar news, kind of with phones and things like that. And I know we're going to get into it here in a second, but Bespoke being an all-day concept, we do have people there during the day on laptops and tablets, and then so handling the transition into dark, sexy bar vibes, we have a strict 6 p.m. cutoff of laptops and tablets.
Oh, cool.
Which is obviously something not all bars have to deal with, but just keeping that transition lean, we do have that as a policy so that people don't have
that's a pretty late cutoff time, too.
Yeah, and that's super fair.
Honest.
That's super
It really is.
Yeah.
And then you give them a grace period until 6:15 when you turn on the electromagnet and just permanently destroy all of their devices. So
Exactly.
you're being very polite about it.
Yeah, and we give them a heads up, we try by 5:30, hey, just so you know, we do no screens going into the nighttime. But yeah, one of the cool things about it being a daytime concept is we do have kind of that after work congregating business Negroni crowd, which is cool.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. So the listeners know, I've been to Bespoke. I got to go there kind of early, I guess pretty early on, right, Robby?
Yeah, I would say that was we had probably been open for a few months at that time.
Right. And yes, in the show notes, Greg, I believe you had a question for me.
I just wanted to ask you, because you said your review, and I'm not blowing smoke up your ass just because you're in the room here, Robby. Damon actually called Bespoke a perfect bar. So I want to get into the whole, day to night look thing that you've got going on, but I want to get the overview from an actual patron, not a paid spokesperson, just a fan, Damon Bolte, on what kind of the concept he saw there is, and then get your take on what you were building there. So yeah, Damon, what made it? This is, I guess, a question for you. What made it a perfect bar?
I love Amari, and I love vintage spirits, and I just love a bar that is warm and inviting, and dude, the drinks are perfect. The back bar is amazing. Just the set, the architecture of the place, and the way that some of the stuff is hidden. The unsexy stuff, like a panel of light switches, or the stuff that you try to hide a lot of times, or you don't, or a lot of people don't in a bar, where it's kind of if you're really if you got your eyes up on everything, which I tend to do that because it's the business we're in, and and all that. So I'll notice those things where I'm like, how would I have fixed that problem visually, or where would I have put this thing instead of right there? Or what's the flow of this room? Bathrooms, big thing, and then he takes me back in the kind of the office area, and they've got a clientele machine and a bandsaw, and I'm like,
yeah.
Every other thing that he shows me, I'm like, God damn it. This is awesome. You walk in and you're immediately comfortable. And yeah, they're we were there during the earlier part of the day. And you got people in there hanging out on their laptops, but it wasn't I didn't hear anyone doing the thing speakerphone we gotta go down, what are you doing after work?
That's what the electromagnet's for, man. That's why they have it.
I gotta get one of these.
So anyway,
they're endlessly useful. For that, and like, you know, that stupid fork that you drop behind the low boy, it works for that too. It's such a multi-purpose tool.
You
know?
wouldn't drop a fork behind the low boy though, because everything's fit perfectly. There's no room to drop anything behind. It's just great. Anyway, it's an awesome bar, and you know, Amari and kind of aperitivo focused. It's just, yeah, it's like all the things that I like anyway, done to perfection in one space. That's all I got.
Councilman, your rebuttal?
Yeah, no, I think that was well said. Obviously, I'm biased and love the space, and yeah, you know, the whole setup, maybe to my own detriment, you know, just obsessed over the details and the height of the bar top, the height of equipment. And I think, you know, as all of us know that have worked behind a bar, you go to so many places that aren't ergonomically set up, or, you know, they're just like, the bar is there, and then you're like, okay, the bar's here, now we have to buy equipment. So they just buy equipment, and they're like, got to buy rails. You go buy rails to fit around it. But I kind of went the back way, and, you know, working with contractors and, you know, setting up the rails in these distances. And they were like, you know, it'd be a lot easier, you know, because we did our rails are all dremeled into the wood and like flat,
right,
in like recessed into the wood instead of just an attachment bolt on, so that it's like one continuation of a countertop. And they were like, you know, we could just not do that and do this. And I mean, the thing was that I was like more willing to be flexible on, you know, the HVAC and this, but I was like, you know, the sinks, the rinsers, the bar top, the grates. I was like, I'm not compromising there. So yeah, it was really cool. And, you know, Damon, when he visited too, I'm sure he saw, I mean, there's a ton of Grand Army in that space. There's a ton of, you know, other bars in that space, you know, elements of things. I mean, a lot of people come into Bespoke and say, this is the most New York place I've felt like outside of New York. So, I mean, I guess I'd take that as like a compliment. You know, New York is my second home forever. So, I love that. But yeah, I would say the details of the space are really special, but when you walk in, it's meant to very much be an approachable neighborhood joint, neighborhood watering hole.
That's to me, there are some things that I want to point out, like or to piggyback on, really, like the drain rail, like being recessed into the bar top. Those are the things that, like, you know, I've done a lot of consulting for bars and restaurants, breweries and stuff like that. And like, you know, when you start working with the general contractors, or you're working with a budget first, that's your first hurdle. But then a lot of the people who design spaces are not, like, pretty much all of them, none of them are bartenders or chefs, you know, mm-hmm. And like, you're like, who's going to be working here? And like, who should really be consulting on this project? Someone who actually does this as a job, you know, like understanding where ice wells go, or just all your dishwasher, and just like
making dump sink, dishwasher,
all the things, you know. And it's the kind of unsexy stuff, you know, when you think about like romanticizing the idea of like a restaurant or bar, winery, any of those kinds of businesses, any business really. It's like, and you know, there are certain things that New York will have you do based on, like you said, like the space itself and
lack of space in New York.
Exactly. And that's kind of like your space ends up being like, I've said this more recently, but your actual physical space ends up being kind of like your most important business partner. Because if the space isn't comfortable, there are certain bars that have come and gone in New York City that we've all been to, where it was like, it's got like a big name behind it, or big names behind it. It's got some capital, but man, they got this spot that like there was one bar I got behind. There was 18 inches of clearance from the back bar to where you could stand, to where the doors, the low boy doors couldn't even open all the way. You know, they would hit the ice wells. So, you know, especially with your spot, there is this beautiful, like, kind of open space. There are some imperfections, like in the tile work on the floor. But I would almost say that they're intentional, you know, because they're so perfectly imperfect.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I mean, yeah, it's the whole thing that you were talking about. It's like, I think if I see a perfectly maintained tile floor at a place, I actually do feel like, was this designed by an AI? But like it's the little things that tell you that this is an actual lived in space. And this all kind of adds up to the sort of ephemeral quality of identity, which I know, Robby, you and I were talking about, because you named a number of things when we were chatting before the show as part of the identity of Bespoke, including, and I'm quoting you here, the coldest beer in town. So what was your process for like building this?
So I guess a little precursor to that, I was very fortunate to work in what I consider to be, and we can talk a little bit more about this further, but what I consider to be two of America's like top neighborhood bar atmospheres in the Crunkleton, the original Crunkleton in Chapel Hill, and also Grand Army. And, you know, I think we came from, you know, a history with like cocktails and cocktail revival where it was very more speakeasy-esque, more dark, hidden, exclusive vibe. And both of these places that I mentioned that I had the privilege of working at were very much, you know, right on the corner, right accessible to the public, open, airy, breezy windows, things like that. So that was always a huge part of my interest as a consumer, but also what I wanted to do with the bar here in Wilmington. So yeah, Bespoke is a cool all-day concept neighborhood bar that has a heavy influence of bitter Italian drinking culture, really robust draft cocktail program, full ice program, you know, freezers in each well, so you're getting frozen glassware at all times. You know, really just cool all around spot. And then we're a coffee shop during the day, or you know, neighborhood bar and coffee shop during the day. So,
well, it really is like very like European in that way, right? Because like your cafes are bars, your bars are cafes,
100%.
You know, kind of thing. So
yeah, 100%. And you know, your mention of like the Budweiser and things like that is, you know, I very much wanted to have some of those traditions of that all day drinking culture, bitter, light, spritzy, Amari, that world. But also like we're very much, you know, in the way that Grand Army was, we're very much an American bar and American neighborhood bar, which I think is like one of the most beautiful parts of like American bar culture is like, you know, really have some great historic bars, historic bar culture, approachable spots, fun spots. And yeah, you know, you don't have to be in either camp, you know, you can kind of embrace the qualities of both. So, you know, I think that is one of the things, like the frosty mug, the coldest Budweiser in town, you know, is like a huge part of our program. And like, we're very much a cocktail bar and we're really serious, but we sell a bunch of really, really cold Budweiser that when you get it, there's a little ice cap on the top. I mean, it's a thoroughly frosted mug. We have glycol lines running at 31. So the Budweiser is like literally as cold as it can go without freezing. Shout out Draft Choice in New York City, came down to Wilmington to do the install. Yeah, you know, just trying to combine both worlds. Yeah, you know, try to achieve that kind of, I know you hear it sometimes here and there, but kind of that highbrow, lowbrow intersection, you know, of what we're trying to do is keep the menu fun, light, nostalgic, approachable, keep the venue warming and comfortable to anyone, regardless of their experience in drinking. And behind the scenes, though, is very serious and very particular.
Yeah,
and,
totally.
Yeah.
To me, the way I thought about it and the way I think about it, everything you look at, you're just kind of like, how can we make this the best possible way possible, right? You know, like yeah, we're gonna have Budweiser on tap. Let's make it fucking like almost frozen, like.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, I know there's a big
frosted mug. What do you want your experience to be like? And the only way you can get that is to have someone experienced in the bar world that understands both. I say that we're all professional drinkers because we're really good at it and we take it seriously. In diners, I would say too. But you have to have someone like that running the show to like really capture those areas and then turn it up to 11, you know, and like make it just like the most badass thing you could do possible. And that's just one. I feel like some of those things get swept in, or they just get overlooked again. You know, it's like again, like you said, it's all in the details and just kind of like figuring out like if we're gonna do this thing, like let's like lean in so hard on it. And I know we're talking about Budweiser on tap right now.
Well, I mean,
Right.
it's almost to me like what the Budweiser on tap symbolizes, right? Like I got to try a little bit. Faccia Bruto did a in-house Amaro for Peter Luger's Steakhouse here in Brooklyn. I don't know if you guys saw this, Lugermeister.
Yeah,
Which-
I did.
Yeah, I got to try a little bit of it last night. It's fucking great. You know what I wanted to cleanse all of that like kind of sweet, very complex flavor off my palate after I was done. I was like, man, really just a nice frosty. I'm more of a Miller High Life man myself, but something like that to really kind of cleanse the palate, which I would almost, and Robbie, I want to hear your take on this. I would almost push back on the fact that that's high-low, because to me, high-low is kind of like, we're going to do a super fancy, like Hypnotic and Coke. Nothing against that, but this is more an acknowledgement of the fact that human beings contain multitudes, and it's possible to want in one breath this extremely esoteric, very flavorful, very regional Amaro, and in the next breath be like, all right, it's Corona time. You know, I'm going to find my beach. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, totally. And I totally hear what you're saying. Yeah, I could see the extreme of highbrow, lowbrow being a little bit more specific like that. But yeah, you know, I think that it really keeps things, you know, covering a wide range of guests too, you know, when you do that. And I know that there's like these big, you know, arguments of like who pulls the best Guinness in New York City. I'm like, man, who pulls the best Budweiser? Who wants to step up and pull a better Budweiser than me? You know, I don't think it's out there. And, you know, Budweiser is one of those things, you know, like where Vessel, you know, changes things too. And, you know, where the source of it, where, you know, High Life, we all know better in a bottle. Great
obviously.
in the bottle. I'd rather have it in a bottle than a can or a draft, High Life. But Budweiser is way better on tap. And I don't really know why. I don't have an explanation.
I
for
do.
that. You know, I don't
actually.
have you know, maybe Damon specifically for that product, why that one's so much better, but it is very good.
If you're hearing the sound of my voice right now, I've got some bad news for you. You are only getting about 60 to 70% of the conversation that we had today with our guest. But if you want to hear the whole thing, you can join us and become a regular on our Patreon.
That's right. To hear the rest of the conversation, join us on our Patreon, become one of our regulars, and you'll receive all kinds of perks, including ad-free listening, so you won't have to hear us do this again.
And in addition to ad-free listening and longer shows, you are also going to get cocktail recipes from all of our guests, access to our live monthly hangouts, and a free cocktail kit each and every month from our good friends at Shaker and Spoon.
So head over to Patreon and become a regular of the Speakeasy. We'd love to have you there. Cheers.
I want to kind of circle back to something that we touched on because this fascinates me. So you are a cafe during the day and a bar at night. And so many people have either wanted to do this concept or tried to do it and found out that it's a lot harder than you would think it would be. Because it's one of these things that makes logical sense, right? It's like the existence of aliens. Like the universe is so vast, they have to be out there. And then you look around and you're like, okay, so where are they? It's the same thing. It's like you're paying rent on the space for 24 hours, whether you're using it during the day or not. Just turn it into a coffee shop during the day. Every bar should be doing this. And then you look around and you're like, and yet there aren't really that many of these. So what is your strategy for succeeding where lots of others have tried and failed?
Yeah, I think that is an awesome question. I think that the big thing, I think, to think, first of all, if you look at the reason a lot of them fail, and then I'll talk a little bit how we ended up here, is that I think that bar people and coffee people are a little bit siloed in their worlds. And so a lot of times when you see these concepts exist, you have a coffee person who's good at that, who's like, we also want to be a bar and serve this, and then but they don't have that background. Or they're a bar and they're like, well, we want to serve coffee, and it turns out, well, your coffee program's pretty mid because you don't come from that background. So which is like fine, you know. I mean, you know, people are still trying, and I think that that's great. But the way I ended up here was that the space and the spot was a pre-existing coffee shop first. So that was something that the community knew was on that corner and were coming to this spot for. And then I added in the business changed hands. I bought the business, totally closed, rebranded, change of concept, and it retained its identity of being open in the morning, but then adding the bar program in the evening, and all day. We're home of the 7 a.m. Negroni, which I don't think many places can say that.
Yeah.
The current earliest one is 7:28. A guy from Miami stopped in and had 2 at 7:28. So that's our record currently for.
I'm not from Miami. Wait, I must have been there later.
But yeah, to answer your question, the coffee, it was one of those things where I have an amazing staff and amazing baristas. And I think the people, to answer your question, is like the biggest thing in the world. And we're talking back to like Damon was talking earlier about concepts and consulting and things like that, is like, my background is more bar focused. And so I was really good at efficiency and setup, and I, was able to do a lot for the coffee program, but I haven't had years of reps steaming milk over and over and over and over, so like that's where the two of like, getting proper consulting, talking to the right people, setting it up correctly, I think is a huge point. So I think, to answer your question, I think it's hard when people that don't have both backgrounds try to do it. And if you do that, I think you need to lean in and get the right support. And
I've worked exactly one barista shift in my life. It was also that was also the day that I put in my 2 weeks notice at that bar. But one of the interesting things that I found is that it is a very similar practice to bartending in so many overt ways, and a very different practice to bartending in so many subtle ways. And you don't realize where those non-transferable skills are until you try and do it. So I like your observation that like coffee people and bar people are similar in so many ways that are visible on the surface, but very, very different underneath. You have to like hire specifically for both.
Absolutely. And it's been so cool. I think that if you were to talk to our bartenders, a lot of them had some initial stresses, and things about learning, about more about coffee and being having pressure put on them to steam milk and do that. Cause that's another cool part of our program, is we're not like, oh, coffee during the day, cocktails at night. It's like, no, we have coffee and cocktails during the day, and it's a little smaller bar program during the day, a little more robust coffee program during the day, and then it kind of flips at night where it's like we're still serving coffee all night. Like if somebody, last night we had live jazz. Live jazz attracts some people that want to come in and have a cappuccino and listen to jazz or a tea. Like, dope. Cool. We do that, and I think another cool thing with this concept is. We're very accessible. I mean, I think that some people would be like, you're making people try to drink more. It's like, well, we're also providing a place for people that don't drink to hang out at night on the alternative. Yeah, totally. We have people tell us all the time. They're like, I don't feel necessarily comfortable going to a dive bar because I don't drink, or I can't go to so-and-so bar because I don't drink, but I can come here and get an espresso or in a Guinness. And, so I think there's just more to it. But my employees, starting off, I think that some of them were a little like, I don't know if I want to do that. Now all of them love it, and they love being able to like pull a cappuccino, and we serve like traditional cafe corretto, where we use Maletti anisette into fresh pulled espresso and then a little soda water back. And so I think that it's like I'm really blessed to have some great people.
I actually want to hear a little more about Wilmington, because we've had a long run of people from like very non-East Village spots on the show so far this year. A surprising amount of them from North Carolina, which is a stunningly cool state. But I guess I would want to know a little bit about how you feel about the fact that this is an era where one doesn't need to pay Greenwich Village rents in order to have a place like this and have a clientele like that.
like I mentioned earlier, New York will always, have a huge piece of my heart. But
it's like I always say, New York City sucks, so it's a real shame it's the greatest place on earth.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. Yeah, I know it's weird, when you leave the hive, the hive mind, you gotta get just a little bit out of it. It's kind of crazy. I feel like New York's like a functioning organism, and it's amazing. It's a hard place to leave. It was a very, very tough move, and I know Damon can relate to that. Like getting out of the city. It's the coolest place in the world. It really is. And you're talking about the people, and especially in this business. But I think also kind of like Damon, I came from and grew up in an area that was not like New York City. So I always, I grew up in the triangle of North Carolina. I grew up north of Hillsborough, not too far from the original Crunkleton. But I grew up on an old family farm in the country, no neighbors, lots of woods, doing all that vibe. So I think that New York always had somewhat of an expiration date to me, because I knew that one day I would want space, and I love cars. I want to be able to work on a car. I want to be able to drive cars and do all that.
$9 for diesel. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Exactly. Waste a bunch of money on gas. And Greg, to kind of fully answer your question about Wilmington, when I kind of had that epiphany, or kind of where Damon ended up to, or considered looking elsewhere, I knew I wanted to open a bar. And, going through COVID and doing all that kind of affirmed that, and we can talk more. COVID conversation could be its own, documentary at this point about
let's not
New York. Yeah. Let's not say we did. But let's just say after all that, I was like, well, maybe I want to open a bar in New York. Started looking in New York, and I was like, well, if I'm looking in New York, I need to consider elsewhere. Then was considering looking at Wilmington, Charleston, Miami, San Juan. I knew I wanted to stay on the East Coast. I like the East Coast. And weirdly, when I was in New York City, I got into surfing at Rockaway. And so that was like a huge thing that I fell in love with while I was in New York, and I wanted to keep doing it. And I love ocean culture and seafood and like all the cuisine that comes with that, and the lifestyle. So that's a big thing with this concept as well. This isn't like, if I were to put us in the same world of kind of some of the other bitter bars that kind of would do something, places I love, like a Dante or a Pisolino, very different, but in that world, Bespoke is way more relaxed. And the Wilmington consumer is way more relaxed. We have people, coming in to get a Negroni that might have just been fishing or surfing or doing that, but also just people that are also working in business downtown, courthouse, all that. So, yeah, I think very, very much inspired by Wilmington to keep it the way it is and keep it approachable, a neighborhood spot. But I do think Bespoke is special, and there's not really much like it. Those places I mentioned are still quite different than Bespoke.
You, as we've talked about, have a very Amari aperitif spritz forward program, and 5-10 years ago that would have made you a very esoteric spot. So I want to kind of take your temperature on this, given that you are a neighborhood spot, given that you are, as we've discussed, not in the 5 boroughs. Has that trend broken containment out into the mainstream, or are there still a lot of explaining you have to do about what Amari are when people sit down at your bar?
Yeah, I think, when you have a concept kind of like this, or I guess anyone that has a concept that is not just we're a bar, but kind of has a touch to it or a direction, it would be still be cool if you were like, oh, we do this thing and we do this, but like we just sell vodka sodas. Like that, that's like something I'm sure that exists in the world. And, but that's not the case. We're very, very, very full on Amari, and that's like what we sell more of than anything. And so I think for one, I think that just speaks to how times have changed, maybe to your point of like exposure. I think COVID, not to harp on that, but I mean, more and more people getting exposed to cocktails, making cocktails at home, and just how approachable some of these are just by concept as well, and like something like a spritz, and learning that they can do that, and you can be with your friends and like, you can do that, Now, granted, you can't do it with, 45 PSI dispensed the right way and really, whatever. But as far as just like interest in that and, keeping it approachable, yeah, man, we are not, like, we're selling like mostly menu stuff, very bitter, lots of Amaro. We do makeshift flights all the time. And, people, our house shot with the Budweiser, we do like an Amaro Rusty Nail from the freezer.
Nice.
Which is equal parts Scotch, Drambuie, and Sfumato. And so it tastes very much like a Rusty Nail, but it's like laced with Sfumato vibes. And it is next to a frozen Budweiser and a frozen little shot glass. I mean, it's incredible. I think just even little things like that, for that being the shot in beer, you're getting more and more people exposed. We sell a ton of Negronis on tap, and which is really, really cool. I think that there's a trend that more people are drinking bitter. For one, I think that, something like a Negroni, I guess, they're still juicy and they're still big, but I feel like you can have several of those or even two of those, and it just doesn't seem as decadent on the palate as some other things, and it goes well with food. Negronis with dinner can work, Negronis with snacks, Negronis with espresso, and then spritz as well, Negronis with Negronis. But also, with all these like, more spritz-like cocktails, I mean, a little lower ABV, so if you're, having several cocktails and you're having a few spritzes, is just a lighter drinking experience. It's more like you're having like, wine or beer, whereas sometimes with cocktails, it's a bigger commitment. Yeah, so, but they don't lack in flavor because they're bitter and, because they have some of that backbone, and then, depending on how you prepare it, have great acidity or carbonation. So yeah, I think it's more and more, I feel like Americans are drinking vermouth or drinking Amari, doing these things that are both food friendly, sessionable. You get a lot of the same joy you get out of having a cocktail. I mean, like when you have vermouth, it's like vermouth's kind of like an Amaro, kind of like the OG cocktails, in a way. It's like, on their own, pretty exciting. On the rocks, soda, pretty exciting, So I think that much like happened with IPAs years ago, which I think people are drinking less of now, I think that once people get, have a Negroni for the first time and they're like, that's wild, but then they are like, before you know it, that's their drink. So I think we've gone over the crest where like I'll see like a group of, I mean, seriously, have a group of like young 20s cats come in, and guys and girls, and they'll all get Negronis and sprit, all bitter, everything, for like a group of 6 or 8. It's pretty exciting. I think it's a good thing happening. So.
Oh yeah, the kids are all right. That's nice to hear.
Yeah, for sure. They're definitely an interesting generation, but they're pretty cool.
Well, speaking of kids, you're the boss at your place, and what's it like for you to be training this next generations of bartenders, and like what are some of like the lessons that you're trying to instill in them? And like to me it seems like I said before, like you go to New York and you learn all these things and you take them with you wherever you go. Do you have a certain kind of like training program that you kind of mentioned, like kind of cross training with baristas and bartenders? What is there any certain things that you've kind of found in the kind of creation of Bespoke and the earlier days here that you might be able to share with us that maybe we could learn from?
Yeah, I think that some of the biggest things, for one, is like, I think this is obvious in all backgrounds and fields, is hiring cool people. I think that more more now than ever. People can go to a lot of bars and get drinks, so it is a people business, and taking care of people, like you said, walking into a room and making people feel good. So I think guest interaction is a huge one. You can't really teach that. So having like the right people that can handle volume and still do that, that kind of age old stuff that has been around for a while. But as far as training, it's definitely, I'm sure for these guys, definitely a little more intense than some of the other spots they had come from, just as far as demands and expectations and things like that. But I think I have had the benefit of, I am still behind the bar as an owner. And so there is a lot of, I'm super intense about like tools back, like they like joke with me about stuff like little stuff like that, wiping this station, that really, really intense for me. And those rules, and they know that, that's like from day one, that was the expectation, still the expectation. And just doing that there beside them. We did have a lot of initial training. We have ongoing training and conversation, but a lot of my connection with staff, is just on the clock and working beside them. But, we have very firm rules. We have a bunch of documents, of course. We talk a lot about round building, whys, classic bar stuff. But, I'm really, our program is very set on efficiency in terms of, we're just bar service, and which I think is a dying art. And one of the things that I took away from the Crunkleton, the original Crunkleton, I think is one of the best bars out there at this, and was when I was there, is there's no servers. We could be 4 deep, and it's just bartenders, and you are controlling the room, pulling that, doing that. And so it has that kind of almost like dive bar sensation of you have to go up to the bar to get a drink, or you do this, but it is cocktail focused, and cocktails are coming out fast. We have a combination of the draft stuff and making stuff, a la minute, and pulling some stuff from the freezer, etc. So a lot of our training comes into like executing timing of like, okay, if you're building 3 drinks, one's shaken, one's a stirred martini, and one's on tap, which one is being finished when is the big one for me. Stuff like that was like the really hard thing to get this generation on, is like a lot of the whys of the little stuff of like, we want the martini to be absolutely as cold as possible, so that's going out this time. Or if we have, we're doing all this with a carbonated cocktail, we want that to be filled very close to the end so that the guest is getting this like carbonated cocktail that's going to like cut them. It's so bubbly instead of one that has been sitting for a minute and a half. So, and like I said, with the tools going back and things like that, is, my staff definitely jokes with like, I'll say, if the building is burning and we've got to get out, or something crazy is going on, tools have to go back first, and then you can leave.
Have they done anything to prank you yet? Like throw your tools into the clientele machine and frozen them into a block of ice?
No, you shouldn't say stuff like this. They would probably love that.
Listen, we just passed April Fool's Day. They're gonna forget it in the next 362 days. Like,
no, but we definitely, I think to answer your question too, is keeping it light and like, having a culture where you're working, and like we all want, it's like accountability and conversation, but not like crazy, not like, like, hey, just, remember this, or like we're doing this, or, so that's been I think in apart from the space, but also just the attention to detail of what we're doing. And I think bar service is a dying art, and it's a really cool thing when you can command a bar and you're getting your butt kicked in a full room and you're crushing it, because you have all these things dialed in. And that was to Damon's point earlier about the setup, is like, if you're getting beasted and the dishwasher's in a bad place, or it's not working right, or the dump sink, or this and that, like, you have to have that stuff set up to make that not a miserable experience when it gets really busy.
I would love to see it when it's crushed at nighttime. I really encourage everyone out there to visit it. It's a cool little town, city, and Wilmington, North Carolina. I did not know. I didn't know. I'd never been to North Carolina. And for all the years, the 20 years that I lived in New York, I didn't really explore much of the Eastern Seaboard because I was just working. And that's kind of like the thing is you're always getting crushed with work. And but then, go to a place like Wilmington and open your own bar. And it's like, you're still going to work, but I think your quality of life seems a lot better. You seem very happy and chill, and it's showing in the fact that you've put out this great product and had the time to actually focus on a lot of the smaller details, without having a room full of New Yorkers screaming at you with $100 bills in their hands trying to get your attention.
He's got the chill 20-year-olds drinking Negronis in his spot. I like it.
Totally.
Well, this tees up our final question pretty well. This is something we always like to ask our guests at the end of the show. Where are you drinking these days? Where else in Wilmington do you like to go and have a little cocktail, ice cold Budweiser, Cortado, what have you?
Yeah, I would say favorite spot here in Wilmington. For a while now, I spend a lot of time at. It's called the Rusty Nail. It is a old school dive here in Wilmington, and it's been around, I want to say, since the 40s or 50s. I mean, it's quite old, and it was originally called Beatty's Tavern, but at some point changed hands and was the Rusty Nail, and has been since. But it is a super cool spot, and their specialty is live blues. So, several nights a week they do blues, and it's a big blues stop for a lot of East Coast acts or traveling acts. Obviously not the bigger ones that are playing at like massive venues, but anybody that would stop at like a smaller, more intimate size spot, they generally will pencil in the Rusty Nail. So they do bring in some like really cool acts, but it is also like, dive, super old, eclectic pictures of old, like scrappy pictures of B.B. King on the wall. Like, I mean, it's very cool, very cool and old and weird, but like just so authentically itself. It's amazing. And yeah, there's not even any low boys, there's just like coolers full of ice on the ground. So your beers are really cold, but they're just coming out of like a igloo cooler.
Do they serve Rusty Nails there?
They will, actually, if you ask. They will.
Yeah.
They will. Yeah.
Well, I think it sounds like you have been giving them the homage with your Rusty Nail.
Yes, I did. Yes, indeed.
Somebody's got to do it.
Somebody's got to do it. Shout out the Rusty Nail,
Nice.
Awesome, man.
Very
Well, hey,
cool.
this has been great having you on the show. Great getting to hear about this. Great catching up with you. If people wanted to follow along with your exploits, if our listeners wanted to keep up with everything you and Bespoke are doing, where can they find you on this big, beautiful internet of ours?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at the Vodka Artist. Kind of funny, long story, different podcast. We can kind of break down the origin of that one. But the Vodka Artist there on IG, and then you can hit us up anytime at bespoke.nc on Instagram as well. So, yeah, and of course, please stop by. Come hang.
That is going to do it for us this week on the Speakeasy. However, if you still want to fill a little bit more of that cold Budweiser in your soul with Damon and me and Souther, you can become a regular on our Patreon. Our Patreon regulars get all sorts of great perks, including longer shows, ad-free shows, cocktail recipes from all of our guests, a free cocktail kit each and every month from our good friends at Shaker and Spoon, and access to our live monthly hangouts. Those are the last Monday of every single month, so be sure to stay tuned for details. And if you are a regular, we will see you there. That is also going to do it for us for this season. We're going to take the next couple weeks off for spring break, and we'll be back in May with some cool people who are opening a cool spot right here in New York City. But as my light is playing me off here in my little studio, that is going to do it for us this week. So until next time, cheers, everybody.
Cheers. Tutto pasa.
Tutto
Cheers,
pasa.
guys.
So you don't charm the devil with your rock and roll load. Knows that country music's gonna save your soul. The